إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد أيها الناس فإن أصدق الكلام كتاب الله وخير الهدى هدى سيدنا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Says Allah Azza wa Jal, what means, O you who have attained faith, be Allah conscious. Have reverence and awe and veneration in your hearts for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that is worthy of who He is, worthy of His names and attributes, and therefore worthy of His glory and majesty, of His beauty and majesty, of His perfection in His beauty and in His majesty, and worthy of the gifts innumerable and the bounties and the favors infinite and unlimited that He subhanahu wa ta'ala consistently bestows upon us. And do not die except in a state of Islam. We do not have a choice again about when to die nor where to die in the divine scale. But we do have a choice about how to die. And thus, says Allah Azza wa Jal, make sure we do not die except in a state of Islam, of loving surrender of our souls and spirits, of our hearts and minds, of our words and deeds, of our actions and reactions, all in loving surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My dear brothers and sisters, this life in an abbreviated form is an alternation between day and night. And between day and night, I mean by that in the metaphorical sense. Between good and bad, light and darkness. Between good and bad. Every human being either does good or does bad. Does virtuous things or evil things. Does things that are beautiful, hasanat, or commits things that are ugly, sayyi'at, or evil, or wrong, or hurtful. The person either obeys Allah Azza wa Jal or disobeys Allah Azza wa Jal. يطيع أو يعصي. A person either commits ta'ah or dhanb, obedience or sin. This is life simplified between the two. No matter what I do or you do, no matter what the simplicity or the sophistication of what I do at every moment in my life is summarized in one of these two. It is either hasana or sayyi'ah. Good or bad. Obedience, therefore, to Allah Azza wa Jal or disobedience to Allah Azza wa Jal. Number one. Number two, this does not go without consequence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, as all of you know, and I am only reminding myself first and then you, that He subhanahu wa ta'ala definitely and most explicitly and unequivocally instructed us about the consequences of what we choose, good or bad, in this world, the consequences of that, and in the hereafter. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات يهديهم ربهم بإيمانهم تجري من تحتهم الأنهار في جنات النعيم, etc. Versus إن الذين كذبوا بآياتنا واستكبروا عنها لا تفتح لهم أبواب السماء ولا يدخلون الجنة حتى يلج الجمل في سم الخياط وكذلك نجزي المجرمين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ ضَلَّ ضَلَالًا مُبِينًا. من جاء بالحسنة فله 10 أمثالها ومن جاء بالسيئة فلا يجزى إلا مثلها وهم لا يظلمون. وأن ليس للإنسان إلا ما سعى وأن سعيه سوف يرى ثم يجزاه الجزاء الأوفى إلى غير ذلك من الآيات of the many ayat that clearly and simply and most explicitly tell us that when we do good, there are consequences of that in our lives in this dunya and in the hereafter. If we face what we may perceive as challenges and hardships in this dunya, let us be able to connect them and relate them to what we do in this life before we were challenged. If we enjoy something beautiful and righteous and delightful in this dunya, let us connect it also to the obedience of Allah Azza wa Jalla in our lives by His grace and merciful love subhanahu wa ta'ala. If this is so, thirdly, why many of us still, even sometimes obstinately and deliberately, in minor issues and in major issues, still choose to disobey Allah Azza wa Jalla, to commit sin, if this is so, and it is. During these few minutes, I'm going to remind myself and my dear brothers and sisters about some essential reasons why that happens. 2 reasons are within you and me. Personal, internal, inward. And 2 or 3 other reasons I'm going to mention are outward of me, external to me, that I should pay attention to. For we fall in sin. And some of us, as I said, fall in sin, in doing bad, in doing wrong, in minor or major issues, deliberately even. The 2 inward reasons inside of us are very simple. You know them, but we don't think of them. Al-jahlu wa hawa an-nafs. First of all, about us. We do wrong when we do wrong. We sin when we sin. We violate the divine norms when we violate them. Wal-'iyadhu billah. In so many ways. First, sometimes the reason is ignorance on our part. Ignorance meaning here that one does not know. One does not know of 2 reasons. One chooses not to know. And one does not know beyond his or her control at the moment. In other words, she or he was not neglectful about learning. But it happened. And that happens. But also we don't know sometimes because we choose to remain as one who doesn't know. Al-jahl about what? Not knowing what? Number 1, that leads us to fall and to sin. And the consequences of sin are, as we mentioned earlier, in general from the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. We don't know about Allah Azza wa Jal There is so much jahl amongst some of us about who God is. When you don't know whom you are disobeying, what sinning against the divine means, what breaking the law means, not knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as to what His attributes are. What is Allah Azza wa Jal? Al-Adl, Al-Muntaqim, Al-Aziz, Al-Jabbar, and Al-Mu'ti, Al-Mughni, Al-Kareem, subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Muhsin. When we don't know Allah Azza wa Jal, we don't know whom we are disobeying and the extent of our sin. And the more we know Allah Azza wa Jal, the more every minor and flimsy sin appears to us as gigantic and colossal. And the less we know of Allah Azza wa Jal, of our ignorance, the less we see our major sins as major. The less we see them as major. We see our major violations as nothing. Not so much. Second, we don't know about the ihsan of Allah Azza wa Jal and the adl of Allah Azza wa Jal. We don't know about God's benevolence and kindness and magnanimity and goodness and ihsan. And we don't know about the extent of Allah's justice and equity and balance. We don't know sometimes about the consequences of what we do. We have not learned to know what the consequences of hasanat, of doing good and being good and obedient to Allah Azza wa Jal and virtuous, what the consequences of that are in this life and in the hereafter. And we do not know enough of the consequences of what we do, bad and wrong, minor or major, the consequences of that in this dunya, in this life, and in the hereafter. We don't know that. We don't know sometimes that something actually is beloved to Allah, or something actually is despised by Allah Azza wa Jal. We don't know, and as I said earlier, we don't know because we choose not to know, or we don't know because we were not taught, and therefore we need to learn. We don't know the consequences sometimes of what we do, good or bad. That's why sometimes, as Rasulullah mentioned to us, that some of us on the day of judgment, when divine justice will be set, many human beings will be faced with divine justice about acts that are so terrible in terms of their consequences in akhirah, in the hereafter, that these human beings amongst us used to look at those sins as very flimsy, nothing. But then when we're faced with the real consequences of that in akhirah, we are flabbergasted. This is the consequence of what I did? To the extent that Rasulullah said, the person utters a word he or she thinks is nothing. يهوي به في قاع جهنم 70 خريفا أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. That would cause him or her to free fall into Jahannam, into the depth of Jahannam for 70 years. Falling. We don't know the consequences of what we do, good or bad. That's within us. Second, the consequences of why we sin, or the reasons of why we sin even knowingly. Second, and nafs. Inside of us, our character, our internal image, our internal drives, what we are inside. We have a shape outside and we have a form inside. That form is the characteristics, the attributes that define us. Inside of us, what is my nafs like? What is my psyche, my personality inside? What am I? Some of us are greedy and selfish and angry and high-tempered and arrogant and deluded and conceited and ostentatious and love leadership and love to be the head and love to be famous and compete for that, a drive inside very strong for that. These attitudes inside of us, this nafs inside of us, could be also positive, beautiful, humble, righteous, kind, generous, forgiving, filled with humility, bypasses the faults of others, generous, benevolent, magnanimous, inside, kind. Or it could be the opposite. A nafs like that. And when a nafs is like that, regardless sometimes of what we know and what we don't know, sometimes even when we know and we have a base negative nafs, we fall. Even when we know. Let alone when we don't know and we don't know enough and we have a nafs also that is inflated. We fall into sin. That's why Rasulullah said, ثلاث المهلكات. 3 are destructive. شح مطاع وهوى متبع وإعجاب المرء بنفسه. All have to do with the nafs. 3 destroy the human being. Any human being, simple or sophisticated, man or woman, scholar or student or lay, anyone, under all circumstances, 3 are destructive. شح مطاع, an obeyed greed, a nafs that is greedy. And it orders us to be greedy in the physical sense and the emotional sense, not only in the physical sense. Muta', but we obey that nafs. We obey that shuh. We do not resist it. We do not restrain it. We do not deny it. We do not struggle against it. We, on the contrary, indulge it. And we even do worse. We justify it. Second, وَهَوًا مُتَّبَعٍ, and a hawa, an internal inclination inside of us that we take as leader. My hawa, that nafs, which has those terrible characteristics, what it commands me, blinds me and becomes my imam. Regardless of what I know. Even what I know, I translate it and I interpret it in light of my hawa, of my nafs. Because it's very, very strong. And the stronger the hawa in me, the more I incline information to suit me. وَإِعْجَابُ الْمَرْءِ بِنَفْسِهِ, said sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and one who is conceited, self-conceited. In other words, self-admiring. He likes or she likes herself. In other words, the nafs becomes my role model. These are destructive. And we disobey Allah Azza wa Jal. We sin on account sometimes of the hawa inside of us. Regardless of how much we know or we don't know. Al-hawa. And the other reasons externally, I'm going to mention 3 reasons externally that lead us to them despite the dhunub, is the surrounding in which I put myself. Assume I know Assume I have even a good nafs or a bad nafs. And I put myself in environments and in surroundings and in conditions which make evil for me easy. I become desensitized. I see it so often, I hear it so often, I am with them so often. That naturally for the average human being amongst us will be affected by that inside of us and consequently in our actions. To the extent, if my companionship is a companionship of fools and stubborn ones and people who follow their hawa and their shahawat and arrogant and conceited and belittle dhunub, rest assured it's only a matter of time until I become one of the statistics. Rest assured. Until I myself become one who will belittle dhunub. Oh, this is nothing. And I am thinking of myself as the greatest person in my community. Surrounding. In that context, two other reasons, my dear brothers and sisters, even when we know, even when we have a good nafs perhaps, but at different levels, availability. We put ourselves in positions that make available to us the means to do wrong, to hurt, to violate, to sin. Availability. It is made available to us. And I run into it. If it were not available, perhaps my nafs would have resisted. But when I see it in front of me, when I hear it in front of me, that availability by itself stirs inside of my nafs, especially if my nafs is weak, it stirs the negative energy to do wrong because it's available. And here, though I said this is an external reason because it's outside of me, yet many of us choose to make the means of wrong available to us by positioning ourselves in those available conditions and even bringing them home and buying them. Availability. After that, accessibility. It may be available but not accessible. And then when it is made even easily accessible to me by others or by the foolishness of my own self, I drive myself to have it accessible. Then the fact that it is so psychologically, socially, and logically, I shall be more likely prone to fall into the sin of whatever kind that sin is. And therefore, I need to know, to remove my ignorance. And I need to pursue the path of what I have to know and need to know. I must have a regular diet of knowledge. A regular diet of knowledge. Most of us, most of the Muslims in most communities, except for some exceptions, do not think we have much to know. Do not think we have much to learn. We are, many of us, so easily bored by knowledge unless that knowledge is entertaining. That is to suit the hawa and the nafs. Number two, we have to work on changing this nafs, on making sure that with knowledge, this nafs is a muzakkah nafs, is a nafs that is cleansed and not sick with diseases. And as to the external parameters and conditions, that Sometimes there is nothing we can do about it. It's there and it's available. Something we can do about it is to keep away from it. And not to make myself be in a surrounding, in a condition that make sin lighter for me in my heart. And that makes it available and that makes it accessible. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم فاستغفروه طوبى للمستغفرين. Seek the forgiveness of Allah Azza wa Jal. Indeed, what an excellent abode awaits those who sincerely and honestly seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Astaghfirullah al-azim. الحمد لله وكفى وصلى الله على عباده الذين اصطفى. My dear brothers and sisters, nobody can reach Allah without Allah. No scholar, no worshipper, no man, no woman can reach Allah without Allah. Knowledge is necessary. Striving is necessary. Resisting the drives is necessary. None of that is sufficient without Allah Azza wa Jal. And therefore, the first and easiest way that I remind myself and you of is dua. Raise your hands, alone or in public, after every salah, and alone. Raise your hands with humility inside of you. Summon, make yourself feel humble and feel humility inside, and turn to Allah and ask Him for His refuge. Ask Him for His help. Ask Him to liberate you, to liberate us from our dhunub. And the consequences of our dhunub that are terrible. The consequences of our dhunub are terrible in this dunya and in akhirah. At the individual level, the community level, the national level, the worldly level. There are consequences. And I close with this. A consequence, an individual consequence of sin is related in this author of our Salaf, rahimahullah ta'ala. Sayyiduna Muhammad ibn Sirin, the great tabi'i scholar, says, rahimahullah ta'ala, in accordance with what the scholars have related, that once he had incurred a debt, Deen, and he could not pay it, and somehow with time that generated inside of him dhiq and gham and anxiety, feeling very low and anxious, constricted. And he, as a scholar, as a wali of Allah, tried to find the answer. Why am I feeling this way? What is this feeling? You know, many of us go take medicine this, medicine that, chemical this, chemical that, etc., etc. And you know the consequences sometimes, some of you do. But he, as he thought and continued to think about it, why am I feeling this way? Until he said, I realized. And Allah made him because he was sincere and honest. I realized that what I am feeling is because of a sin I committed 40 years ago. Inna Allah la yansa. We forget. Allah does not forget. And there are consequences of dhunub in this world before the hereafter. And yet, وَيَعْفُو عَنْ كَثِيرٍ. And yet, by His merciful grace and loving mercy, He pardons most. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنكَرِ وَالْبَغْيِ يَعِظُكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. اللهم اغفر لنا وتب علينا وارحمنا واهدنا واهد بنا واجعلنا هادين مهديين غير ضالين ولا مضلين لا مبدلين ولا مغيرين يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وأحينا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. اللهم اجعل خير أيامنا وأسعدها يوم ملقاك. اللهم انصر الإسلام وأعز المسلمين. اللهم آمن روعاتنا واستر عوراتنا وأصلح ذات ديننا واجعلنا هادين مهديين غير ضالين ولا مضلين ولا تحاسبنا ولا تؤاخذنا بأفعالنا وأعمالنا وأقوالنا السيئة القبيحة إنك لطيف إنك كريم إنك غني يا رب العالمين. فاعف عنا وارفعنا ولا تخفضنا فارفعنا ولا تخفضنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. عباد الله قوموا إلى صلاتكم يرحمكم الله.